At 6:15 a.m. on a cold December morning in 2008, federal agents surrounded a brick townhouse on Chicago's northwest side. Inside, the sitting governor of Illinois was still asleep. Within minutes, the knock came. Then the words that would end a political career and expose one of the most shocking corruption scandals in modern American history. The man being arrested wasn't a mob boss. He wasn't a shadowy financier. He was the elected governor of a U.S. state. His name was Rod Blagojevich, and according to the FBI, he believed democracy had a price. A state already known for corruption. Illinois did not stumble into scandal by accident. For decades, the state had carried a reputation that insiders joked about and outsiders feared. If corruption were a sport, Illinois would be a dynasty. By the time Rod Blagojevich took office in 2003, several of the state's top officials had already faced indictments, convictions, or prison sentences. But Blagojevich promised something different. He campaigned as a reformer, a man who would clean house. He spoke the language voters wanted to hear: ethics reform, transparency, accountability. He portrayed himself as the antidote to corruption, and people believed him. The rise of a political star. Rod Blagojevich's rise was fast and impressive. The son of Serbian immigrants, he built his political image on hard work, resilience, and ambition. He served as a state legislator, then a U.S. congressman, before setting his sights on the governor's mansion. When he won, he made history, becoming Illinois' first Democratic governor in decades. But behind the speeches and smiles, federal investigators were already watching. Because something wasn't right. The wiretaps begin. Federal agents don't wiretap a sitting governor lightly. By 2008, the FBI believed Blagojevich was involved in a broad pattern of corruption, pressuring businesses for campaign contributions, trading official acts for personal gain, and treating public office like a private ATM. So they did something extraordinary. They listened. For months, the FBI recorded Blagojevich's phone calls, conversations he believed were private, candid, and safe. What they captured would later shock the nation. Because on those tapes, the governor didn't just sound corrupt. He sounded comfortable being corrupt. The Senate seat that changed everything. Then history intervened. In November 2008, Barack Obama was elected president of the United States. That victory created a sudden vacancy. Obama's U.S. Senate seat from Illinois was now empty. Under state law, the power to appoint a replacement belonged to one man, Rod Blagojevich. What should have been a solemn constitutional responsibility quickly became something else entirely. On the wiretaps, Blagojevich spoke openly about the Senate seat as if it were personal property. Not a public trust, not a democratic institution, but a commodity, something to be sold. This thing is golden. On one recorded call, Blagojevich vented his frustration. He didn't want to give the Senate seat away for free. Why would he? As far as he was concerned, this was leverage he intended to use. He discussed trading the appointment for high-paying jobs, political favors, campaign donations, personal benefits. At one point, he referred to the Senate seat in blunt, unforgettable language. "This thing is golden," he said. Golden, not sacred, not earned. Golden. To federal agents listening in real time, it was clear. The governor believed he could auction off a piece of American democracy. Power without fear. What makes this case so disturbing isn't just the crime. It's the confidence. Blagojevich didn't whisper. He didn't hesitate. He didn't sound worried. On tape, he laughed. He bragged. He complained about not getting enough in return. This wasn't a man who feared consequences. This was a man who believed the system wouldn't stop him. And that belief would become his undoing. The arrest. Federal prosecutors knew they couldn't wait. If Blagojevich appointed someone to the Senate, the damage would be done, even if the appointment were later challenged. So they moved fast. On December 9, 2008, agents arrested the sitting governor of Illinois at his home. The news exploded nationwide. A governor, under arrest, for trying to sell a Senate seat. The criminal complaint detailed the wiretaps, the conversations, the schemes, and Americans were stunned. Public denial. Within hours, Blagojevich stood before cameras. He looked calm, confident, defiant. He denied everything. He called the charges false. He claimed political persecution. He insisted he had done nothing wrong. But the tapes told a different story. And once they became public, there was no walking them back. Impeachment and fallout. Illinois lawmakers acted quickly. Blagojevich was impeached and removed from office, the first Illinois governor to face that fate in decades. The state wanted distance. The political establishment wanted him gone. But removal from office was only the beginning. The real reckoning would come in court, the trial that exposed everything. Blagojevich's trial became a national spectacle. Jurors heard hours of recorded conversations. Raw, unfiltered, damning. They heard a governor talk about public office as leverage. They heard him bargain. They heard him scheme. The defense argued the conversations were just political talk. Exaggerated, harmless, misunderstood. But prosecutors disagreed. They argued the recordings revealed intent. Clear, unmistakable intent. And eventually the jury agreed. Conviction and prison. Rod Blagojevich was convicted on multiple federal corruption charges. The sentence was severe, 14 years in federal prison. A stunning fall for a man who once stood at the top of state power. A governor reduced to an inmate number. Why this case still matters. This story isn't just about one corrupt politician. It's about how fragile trust can be. Because when a governor believes he can sell democracy and says it out loud, it forces an uncomfortable question. How many others thought the same, but never got caught? Blagojevich didn't invent corruption in Illinois. He just said the quiet part out loud. But this was only the beginning, because in the same state, another governor's corruption wouldn't just steal money or power. It would cost lives. And when that story came to light, America would learn something even darker about what corruption can really do. Most corruption stories are about money, greed, power, favors traded behind closed doors. But this one is different. Because this time, corruption didn't just steal from taxpayers, killed people, and the man at the center of it wasn't a shadowy bureaucrat or a low-level official. He was a former governor of Illinois, George Ryan, whose decisions turned highways into graveyards. A routine traffic stop that changed everything. On a quiet day in January 1994, a semi-truck rolled through Illinois. The driver should never have been behind the wheel. He barely spoke English. He didn't understand basic road signs. He lacked the skills required to control a massive commercial vehicle. Yet somehow he had a valid commercial driver's license. Moments later, the truck slammed into a minivan. 6 children died. The youngest was just 4 years old. At first, investigators treated it as a tragic accident. But as they dug deeper, they uncovered something far worse. Licenses for sale. Illinois' Secretary of State's office controls driver licensing. At the time of the crash, George Ryan was the Secretary of State, the same office responsible for issuing commercial driver's licenses. What investigators discovered would expose a system poisoned by corruption. Truck drivers who failed tests, applicants who couldn't read English, drivers who didn't know how to shift gears. All of them had licenses. How? Bribes, cash payments, favors, political donations. Instead of skill determining who could drive, money did. And the roads paid the price. A culture of corruption. This wasn't a single bad decision. It was a culture. Employees inside the licensing offices accepted bribes as routine. Middlemen connected drivers with officials willing to look the other way. Test results were altered. Failures were erased. In some cases, no test was given at all. As long as money changed hands, the license was approved. The system worked until people started dying. The fatal pattern. The 1994 crash wasn't isolated. Investigators began reviewing other accidents involving commercial vehicles. What they found was chilling. Drivers who caused deadly crashes often shared one thing in common. They had obtained their licenses through corrupt channels. Each new discovery added weight to an unavoidable conclusion. This wasn't negligence. It was a systemic betrayal of public safety. Rising to governor. Despite the growing scandal, George Ryan's political career didn't slow down. In fact, it advanced. Ryan later became governor of Illinois. The man whose office oversaw one of the deadliest licensing scandals in state history now held the highest executive power. To many voters, the corruption was invisible. To federal investigators, it wasn't. The investigation tightens. Federal prosecutors began connecting the dots. They weren't just looking at bribes for licenses. They were examining a broader pattern of corruption tied to Ryan's political machine. Campaign contributions tied to official favors. Contracts steered toward allies. Government decisions influenced by personal gain. The license scandal became the gateway. Once agents started pulling threads, the whole structure began to unravel. A moral line crossed. What made this case different and far more disturbing was the consequence. Most corruption cases involve stolen money or abuse of authority. Here, corruption put unqualified drivers behind the wheel of multi-ton vehicles traveling at highway speeds. Every bribe accepted carried an unspoken risk. Someone could die. And eventually they did. 6 children, 6 empty seats at dinner tables, 6 families forever changed. Prosecutors make their case. When the case went to trial, prosecutors focused on more than financial crimes. They framed corruption as recklessness, as a conscious choice to ignore danger. They argued that Ryan knew, or should have known, what was happening inside his office, and that he benefited from a system that traded safety for profit. The jury listened to testimony from former employees, middlemen, and drivers. The story was consistent. Bribes were expected. Oversight was absent. Warnings were ignored. Conviction of a governor. In 2006, George Ryan was convicted on federal corruption charges. The verdict sent shockwaves through Illinois. A former governor, a former Secretary of State, convicted. The sentence was harsh. More than 6 years in federal prison. The judge made it clear this wasn't just about money. It was about responsibility. The death penalty twist. There was one final, haunting layer to this story. Years earlier, as governor, Ryan had been responsible for overseeing executions. But as evidence of corruption and wrongful convictions surfaced, he took an unprecedented step. He declared a moratorium on the death penalty in Illinois. Later, he commuted every death sentence in the state. Some saw it as moral courage. Others saw irony. A governor whose administration allowed deadly corruption now making life and death decisions for others. History would debate his motives. The record would not erase the harm. Public reaction. The public response was divided. Some felt sympathy for Ryan's later actions. Others felt outrage. Because for the families of the 6 children killed in that crash, justice could never be complete. No prison sentence could bring them back. No reform could undo the damage. Why this case still haunts America. This story forces an uncomfortable truth. Corruption doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like paperwork, like signatures, like shortcuts. But when safety is compromised, corruption becomes lethal. And when leaders ignore that risk, they don't just break laws. They gamble with lives. The pattern emerges. By now, a pattern is forming. In Module 1, we saw a governor who tried to sell democracy. In Module 2, we see corruption that turned highways into crime scenes. Different crimes. Same disease. Power used without accountability. And the next story? It will show how greed crossed from paperwork into absurdity. When federal agents opened a freezer and found something no one expected. By the time federal agents opened the freezer, the investigation was already over. They had the wiretaps. They had the witnesses. They had the recordings. But what they found inside that freezer would turn a serious corruption case into a moment so bizarre, so unforgettable, that it would become part of American crime folklore. Because stacked inside, wrapped in foil and frozen solid, was $90,000 in cash. And it belonged to a sitting member of Congress. A congressman with global ambitions. The man at the center of this scandal was William Jefferson. Representing Louisiana's 2nd Congressional District, Jefferson was a powerful figure in New Orleans politics. Well-connected, influential, ambitious. Publicly, he portrayed himself as a lawmaker focused on economic development, especially in Africa, where he claimed to be building business partnerships that would benefit American companies. Privately, federal investigators believed something else was happening, something illegal, the business deal that raised red flags. The case began with what appeared to be an international business proposal. Jefferson was allegedly helping a private company secure telecommunications contracts in Africa. On the surface, this looked like routine political networking, but investigators noticed a pattern. Jefferson wasn't just making introductions. He was demanding payments, large payments. According to the FBI, Jefferson told business associates he could use his influence to secure contracts, but only if he received a cut. This wasn't lobbying. It was bribery. The FBI steps in. Federal agents launched a covert investigation. They wired informants. They monitored meetings. They listened to conversations. And what they heard was alarming. Jefferson allegedly discussed bribes openly, referring to payments as if they were standard operating procedure. He wasn't cautious. He wasn't subtle. He spoke like someone who believed the rules didn't apply to him. The sting. Eventually, the FBI decided to move. They arranged a sting operation using a cooperating witness, a businessman who agreed to deliver money while agents monitored the exchange. In a recorded meeting, Jefferson accepted a briefcase containing $100,000 in cash, which the FBI had marked and tracked. The understanding was clear. The money was a bribe. Jefferson took it. Then he left. What happened next would make history. The drive home, Jefferson didn't deposit the money in a bank. He didn't report it. He didn't hide it in a safe. Instead, he drove home. And when he arrived, he did something no one, not even the FBI, could have predicted. He walked into his kitchen, opened the freezer, and put the money inside. The search warrant. When agents later executed a search warrant on Jefferson's home, they expected to find evidence, documents, electronics, paper trails. What they did not expect was a freezer crime scene. Inside, wrapped in aluminum foil and plastic bags, were stacks of cash. $90,000 of the marked bribe money, frozen, preserved, as if corruption could be stored indefinitely. A scandal goes public. When news of the freezer money broke, it dominated headlines. Late-night comedians seized it. News anchors repeated it. The public couldn't get over it. A U.S. congressman, a freezer, $90,000 in cash. The absurdity made it unforgettable. But behind the spectacle was a serious crime. Jefferson's defense. Jefferson denied wrongdoing. He claimed the money wasn't a bribe. He argued it was meant for legitimate business purposes, and that storing it in the freezer was simply a precaution. Against theft, against loss, against heat. The explanation didn't convince prosecutors or the public. The trial. At trial, jurors heard recorded conversations, saw surveillance footage, and reviewed financial evidence. They learned how Jefferson allegedly used his office to promote private business deals, how he pressured companies, how he expected payment. The freezer money became the symbol, but it wasn't the only evidence. Prosecutors argued that Jefferson blurred the line between public service and personal profit until it no longer existed. Conviction. In 2009, William Jefferson was convicted on multiple felony counts, including bribery. He was sentenced to prison. A powerful congressman reduced to another corruption statistic. Another elected official exposed. Why this case still resonates. This story sticks with people not just because of the crime, but because of the image. A freezer full of cash is absurd, but it's also revealing. It shows how corruption warps judgment, how power creates a sense of invincibility, how officials convince themselves they won't be caught, even when committing crimes in their own homes. Corruption as routine. What's most disturbing isn't the freezer. It's how normal the crime seemed to Jefferson. There was no panic, no rush to hide the money offshore, no elaborate scheme, just a freezer. That kind of casual corruption doesn't come from desperation. It comes from entitlement, connecting the pattern. By now, the pattern is undeniable. In Module 1, power was treated like a commodity to be sold. In Module 2, corruption turned deadly. In Module 3, greed crossed into farce without ever stopping being criminal. Different methods, same mindset, public office as private property. The T's forward. But the next story won't be absurd. It will be aggressive, because the next official didn't just take bribes. He ruled a city like a criminal enterprise, silencing critics, intimidating witnesses, and living like royalty while his city collapsed. And when federal prosecutors finally stepped in, they didn't charge corruption. They charged racketeering. By the time federal prosecutors used the word racketeering, it was already over. That word isn't used lightly. It's reserved for organized crime, for criminal enterprises, for systems built on intimidation, corruption, and silence. But in this case, prosecutors weren't talking about the mafia. They were talking about City Hall. And the man at the center of it all was the mayor of Detroit, Kwame Kilpatrick. The rise of a political prodigy. Kwame Kilpatrick didn't just enter politics. He was born into it. His father was a powerful political figure in Michigan. Doors opened early. Expectations followed him everywhere. Kilpatrick was young, charismatic, and polished. He spoke with confidence and projected vision. To many, he represented the future of Detroit, a city desperate for revival. When he became mayor in 2002, supporters believed they were witnessing a new era. What they didn't see was how quickly power would rot. The lifestyle no one could explain. Almost immediately, questions began to surface. Kilpatrick lived lavishly. Luxury vehicles, designer suits, private security details, extravagant travel. But Detroit was struggling. The city was facing budget crises, failing infrastructure, and rising crime. Residents asked a simple question: how could their mayor afford this lifestyle? The answers weren't public. Yet, private affair turns public. The scandal that cracked everything open didn't start with money. It started with text messages. Kilpatrick was having an affair with his chief of staff, a relationship that, on its own, might have stayed private. But when lawsuits emerged involving the firing of police officers, the existence of those messages became explosive. Kilpatrick denied the affair under oath. So did his chief of staff. They swore the messages didn't exist. They were lying, the texts that changed everything. When the messages were exposed, they revealed more than an affair. They showed abuse of power, discussions about firing officers, attempts to silence critics, coordination to cover up wrongdoing. The mayor hadn't just lied. He had committed perjury. And once investigators realized he was willing to lie under oath, they started asking what else he was hiding. A pattern of intimidation. As federal agents widened their investigation, they uncovered something far darker than a personal scandal. Witnesses described intimidation. City contractors said they felt pressured to give kickbacks. Employees feared retaliation. Opponents were targeted. This wasn't chaos. It was control. According to prosecutors, Kilpatrick ran Detroit like a criminal organization, rewarding loyalty and punishing dissent. Public funds, private gain. Money began to surface everywhere investigators looked. Kilpatrick allegedly used city funds for luxury travel, personal expenses, gifts and favors. Contracts were steered toward allies. Public money flowed outward, not to fix streets or fund services, but to maintain power. Detroit's residents were paying the price. The federal case forms. Federal prosecutors didn't rush. They built. They gathered financial records. They flipped witnesses. They followed money trails. And when they were ready, they didn't file standard corruption charges. They went bigger. They charged racketeering. The message was clear. This wasn't isolated misconduct. It was a system. The trial of a mayor. The trial was long and relentless. Jurors heard testimony from insiders who described fear, loyalty tests, and punishment. They learned how City Hall functioned less like a government office and more like a hierarchy, with Kilpatrick at the top. The defense tried to paint him as flawed but not criminal. Prosecutors disagreed. They presented evidence of bribery, extortion, fraud, witness tampering. The picture was devastating. conviction, and sentence. In 2013, the verdict came back. Guilty. Kwame Kilpatrick was convicted on multiple counts, including racketeering. The sentence was staggering: 28 years in federal prison. A mayor, once celebrated as Detroit's future, now facing decades behind bars. The courtroom fell silent. The fall was complete. Detroit left behind. But the real tragedy wasn't just Kilpatrick's downfall. It was the damage left behind. Detroit was already fragile. Years of corruption had drained trust, money, and momentum. Kilpatrick's administration didn't create the city's problems, but it deepened them. Residents felt betrayed. A city that needed leadership had been treated like a resource to exploit. Why this case still resonates? This story matters because it shows how corruption evolves. It doesn't always start with a bribe. It starts with ego, with entitlement, with the belief that power equals immunity. And when that belief goes unchecked, corruption stops being personal. It becomes structural. The pattern is complete. Now, the pattern is unmistakable. A governor who tried to sell democracy, a system that killed innocent children, a congressman who froze bribe money, a mayor who ran a city like a criminal enterprise. Different offices, different methods, same outcome: public trust destroyed. The final question, which brings us to the most uncomfortable truth of all: these weren't isolated villains. They were symptoms. Symptoms of systems that allowed corruption to grow until it became normal, until it became invisible, until it became deadly. End of Module Ts. In the final module, we step back. We connect the dots, and we ask the question no one wants to answer. If this happened before, and it happened again, what's stopping it from happening right now? By now, it should be impossible to believe these stories are coincidences. A governor who tried to sell a Senate seat, a licensing system that turned highways into death traps, a congressman who froze bribe money in his own home, a mayor who ruled a city like a criminal enterprise. Different people, different crimes, same country. So the final question isn't who committed these crimes. It's how they were allowed to happen at all. Corruption isn't an accident. Corruption doesn't appear overnight. It grows quietly. It thrives in systems where oversight is weak, loyalty is rewarded over honesty, power concentrates without consequence. In every case you've heard in this series, warning signs existed long before indictments. They were ignored because ignoring them was easier. The myth of the bad apple. Americans love a simple explanation. Blame the individual, call them a bad apple, move on. But that explanation collapses under scrutiny, because bad apples don't survive alone. They survive in environments that protect them. In each of these cases, corruption was not a secret. It was an open secret. People knew, people suspected, people stayed silent. The cost of silence. Silence is corruption's greatest ally. Employees who feared retaliation, contractors who wanted future work, politicians who didn't want to rock the boat. In Illinois, silence allowed unqualified drivers to stay on the road. In Louisiana, silence normalized bribes. In Detroit, silence let intimidation flourish. Silence didn't just enable corruption, it multiplied it. Power and proximity. The closer someone is to power, the harder they are to challenge. Governors appoint allies. Mayors control contracts. Lawmakers influence funding. Challenging them can mean losing a job, losing protection, losing a career. So people weigh risk against conscience. And too often, conscience loses. Why the FBI gets involved so late? Many viewers ask the same question. If this corruption was so obvious, why didn't authorities stop it sooner? The answer is uncomfortable. Federal agencies don't intervene without evidence strong enough to survive court. They don't act on rumors. They need proof. That proof often comes late, after years of damage. By the time wiretaps start, corruption has already metastasized. Reforms born from scandal. To be fair, change did come. After these cases, ethics laws were tightened. Oversight committees gained power. Transparency rules expanded. Illinois reformed licensing procedures. Detroit restructured city contracting. Federal sentencing guidelines sent a message. But reform is reactive. It follows damage, not prevention. The illusion of immunity. One common thread ran through every case in this series. Each official believed they were untouchable. They weren't reckless because they were careless. They were reckless because they felt protected. Protection came from political allies, legal gray areas, public trust. They mistook authority for immunity, and that mistake cost them everything. The human cost we forget. It's easy to focus on the drama, the arrests, the headlines, the prison sentences, but corruption leaves quieter victims behind. Families who lost children, cities stripped of resources, communities that stopped believing in leadership. Those costs don't disappear when a sentence is handed down. They linger. Why these stories still matter today? These cases aren't relics of the past. They're warnings, because the systems that allowed this corruption still exist. Not in the same form, not in the same offices, but with the same vulnerabilities. Power still concentrates. Oversight still weakens over time. Silence still feels safer than speaking out. The names change. The patterns don't. The question that lingers. Every generation believes corruption is something that happened before them. Something we've learned from. Something we've fixed. But history suggests otherwise. Corruption doesn't end. It adapts. What stops it? There's no simple solution. But these cases show what makes corruption harder to hide. Independent oversight, whistleblower protection, public scrutiny, relentless documentation. Sunlight doesn't eliminate corruption, but it starves it. Why this channel exists? This is why stories like these matter. Not to sensationalize, not to entertain, but to document. Because power depends on memory fading, and accountability depends on remembering. Final retention moment. Pause before ending. If you've made it this far, you've seen something important. Not just what corruption looks like, but how ordinary it can become. And that realization is uncomfortable. It should be. If you believe these stories matter, if you think powerful crimes deserve to be remembered, if you want real cases documented without excuses, subscribe. This channel exists to tell the stories that were buried, and to make sure they stay buried in history, not repeated in the future. Final line, let it sit. Power doesn't corrupt because it's evil. Corrupts because it's quiet. And because too many people stop listening.